first arrived at camp, things pretty much didn't go exactly how we planned. We expected orphans from 10 to 12, and we showed up, and the kids were mostly from Child Protective Services, ranging anywhere from 5 to 17, mostly teenagers though, which was a completely different crowd than we planned on. And then the next thing we knew, we had also planned on different groups that we were going to split up into for ESL and for devotional time. And Oleg's wife, Marina, had a different idea, so she split us up into different groups than we'd planned, and I got paired with Franny White. Our translator was female, but we got paired with 9 boys, ranging from the age of 12 to 17. After we spent a little time with them, well, I guess I should say first I was completely freaked out by this idea. Franny was really okay with it, but I was kind of uncomfortable with the idea of 9 boys, half of them who really looked like young men. So, but after a couple days and getting to know them, I realized they were just really hungry for family and really hungry for parents. And so what Franny and I just really stressed to them was that if you believe in Jesus and invite him into your heart, then we have the same Father in heaven, and we are therefore family. And so this really resonated with them, I felt like, and so we repeated it a lot during every devotional time or memory verse. Over half the boys were from the Belts home, and so we knew that they had at least heard the gospel and probably attended church at some point, so some of this stuff was not new to them. But I think the idea that we could be related somehow and have a connection after we leave there physically meant a lot to them. So the last night that we were leaving, a couple of them actually were telling me bye and just responded to me and said family back and forth, and I said, yeah, we're family.
So one of the best parts of the week was just being able to invest into the lives of the kids in our group. And like by the end of the week, I had a relationship with each one of the kids, even if I really couldn't talk to them that much. You know, I could do hand signals, or we even played rock, paper, scissors a little bit. And there was one girl in particular who, I really got close to, and it took a couple of days because the first 3 days of the camp, they were kind of closed off. And, I mean, you built it up after that. But, she hung out a lot with me, and Faith and I had this art workshop that we were doing where we painted crosses, and she came one of the first few days to do that workshop, and she really loved it. And then at the last day, I saw her again, and I'm like, okay, she wants to do the workshop again, that's fine. But as we started, and I was starting to explain what to do to all the kids, she starts doing something a little different, and I don't bother because she's done it before, so I figure she knows what she's doing. But then I start seeing that she's like forming my name out of like the crayons that we'd given everyone, and I'm like, whoa, like what is she doing? And so then I keep teaching the kids how to do the art project, and she's just working away on her own thing. And at the end of the workshop, everyone's, packing up, getting ready to go, and she comes up to me with a smile on her face, and she has this really beautiful painting that has my name, a heart, and like watercolor paint all over it, and she's just so happy to give it to me. And I just thought that was so sweet. She didn't have a lot, and she didn't have anything fancy, but she gave to me what she could. And just the joy that it brought her, it really inspired me that, gifts don't always have to be elaborate.
So I just wanted to communicate a couple of lessons that I learned through this whole process, some things that God has been teaching me. And first we did a lot of planning for this trip, like a lot of planning. And a lot of things we planned for did not really happen and didn't happen the way we expected them to. Just one quick example of that, there are many, but one example would be the Moldovans had said we're going to be in groups of 2, and those groups would be assigned a group of kids, and we would teach them ESL and Bible study application throughout the week. And so we were meeting in our little groups. I'd met with Jordan a couple times, and we had this big thing typed up on ideas for Bible study application, and then we got there to Moldova, and day 1 of the camp, and we were assigned to different groups. So all that planning went out the window. But the groups they assigned us to were really good, and they worked out well, and I heard great stories of everybody in their groups. And so the takeaway for me is God's plans are better than our plans. And being such a planner myself, and being almost rigid with my planning sometimes, I'm learning that I need to get myself out of the way and sometimes get my plans out of the way and allow God to work in my life, because His plans are better than ours. And the other thing is, if you want to see God work in your life, talk to Him. My prayer life has been a lot more consistent because of this trip, just in the months leading up to the trip. And since then, and the more I prayed, the more I saw God show up and answer prayer and confirm His will and leading, and just time and time again. So it seems obvious, but the more you pray, the more opportunity you have to see God answer your prayer. So if you want to see Him work in your life, talk to Him.
Well, one of the most inspiring things that I remember about the trip was sitting next to Oleg as we were driving to and from the orphanage. The man is an absolute visionary. He's got all kinds of ideas for improving the economy in Moldova, as well as his ministry and things he wants to do. Oleg told me one thing in particular that stuck with me, and that's that what his definition of a good day was. And that was, if he got to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with somebody, that made it a good day. And if he didn't, that was a bad day. And so he had many opportunities to do that while we were there, and it was wonderful watching him. He inspired me greatly. From now on, I'll rate a good day if I get to share the gospel with somebody, and a bad day is when I don't.
Well, one of the things that I did before the trip was just to have people from the church make up a little picture or say God bless you on a little wooden disc like this. And then when we got there, we gave those out to the children, the people that came to the camp. And I had brought extra ones so that if they wanted to make a design on the wooden disc, they could. And then that's why people at church here who want one could just have one. You know, it came from Moldova. So like this. I had to put a brown string around it so that they could wear it for the time they were at camp if they wanted to. They could put their name on it so that, another way for us to recognize their names. So some of them did wear them, and some of them they knew they could just take it home and remember that week at camp. And the reason I just asked them if they wanted to make one was just so that you guys here at church could just have a remembrance of the kids at camp just by having them.
One of the cool things for me was when I was asked to do my testimony in front of the whole camp. And that morning, what they taught the kids during Bible lesson was very similar to what my experience was. And so I just felt it was such a God's timing to have the kids pose the question, how sure are you of going to heaven, when that is exactly what was the question that was given to me when I became a believer. And at the time I said 50%. You know, I knew I didn't do everything right, and then it was explained to me about how we're all sinners and how Christ died for us and how we needed to repent. And so that was just really awesome, that God's timing, how God's timing worked in all that. And the other cool thing with my testimony was about half an hour before I gave my testimony, my boss sent me a text with a heart and praying hands. And I was so encouraged. And I get back home and I said, Laura, you sent me a text right before I gave my testimony. How awesome. And she said, well, Dana, you texted me. You texted me some gibberish. And I said, no, I didn't. She said, yeah, you did. So I thought, well, I can't send you words, but I'll just send you the emojis so you know I'm praying. And so I went back and looked at my phone, and sure enough, I had texted her gibberish, but I didn't mean to. It was in my pocket, and that's why she texted me. So that was just really cool how that worked out.
When I went into Moldova, it was a little bit of a shock first. I saw and heard a lot of broken stories and about the people. It was just really hard to hear. And I kept thinking in my head, like, how in the world can I even make an impact to these people when they've seen and heard so many more horrible things than I could even understand and imagine. But when I heard from those people who were Christians and how their lives changed, it was truly amazing, because these people understood what it was like to have no father. And so when they had a father in God, they were amazing. They could understand what it was like to have nothing. And so to have a faith in God was the most precious thing they'd ever had. And that was probably something that was so cool, because God can really change anybody. And He can take even the worst situations and make it for something good. And that was probably the most amazing thing that I learned from this trip, because no matter what broken story, God can change that and make it for something even better.
Well, there's a lot of stories that I think I could share, but I think there's one main concept that God taught me, and that is what it means to be a Christian. And you can see over there, like in the New Hope Moldova team, and especially like the transition home parents, how they are laying down their lives every day. And I think that's very evident. We had the joke that if you're over in Moldova, you sleep when you're dead. So like 4 or 5 hours of sleep over there is very like the norm, as I think a lot of people noticed on the team. And that's just one way that I think they're laying down their lives, but that's very evident. But yet they still have joy in the midst of it, and even though they have very difficult circumstances and unexpectations, so they just taught me like what it means to have joy in the midst of that.
I think the highlight of my trip was 2 twin boys who were in Kristen and I's small group, and they made the entire trip. The first couple days we kind of figured out that they spoke English, and that was really exciting because a lot of our kids did not speak English. So that was exciting just to be able to find out that we could communicate with them. And then the more that we got to know them, it was really just laid on our hearts to give them a Bible. And so we had the opportunity to sit down with them and go over the Bible and just what the Bible was in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And we were able to do that for maybe like 30 minutes that first day. And we had suggested to them, well, maybe if you wanted to, you could read John. Well, the next day, one of our team members came up to us and was like, they just told me they read John. And so that was exciting again. And so we had another opportunity to sit down with them and really just go over how to study the Bible. And they asked so many questions and were so interested in such sponges. And I think that was the highlight of the trip, because I could see their eagerness to learn, and to learn not only about God, but like how to apply the Bible to their life. And we ended up finding out that they did not have a Bible. So they did not have access at all to a Bible this entire time. And they said that they've been Christians. They've had a relationship with God. And so I can't imagine having that relationship with God and not having access to the Bible. And so that was just a really cool moment, but a humbling moment too, of that we need to be grateful for what we do have, and for that we have 3 or 4 Bibles laying around our house. And so that was definitely the highlight of my trip.
I think it was amazing how we were so prepared for things to go our way, and then we got there and God just kind of showed up, and that He had a different plan. He wanted us to teach the kids certain things in the manner that He wanted it taught, and no manner of preparation made me feel comfortable sharing my testimony. The first time was in front of the team. And maybe one other time I had tried in front of like a home group, but I still just felt so uncomfortable. But God made it perfect in that it was the exact day that we were talking about friendship. And I think my testimony speaks so much to friendship and just not feeling lonely. And it was that for everybody who gave their testimony and when they gave their testimony. Just things like that, just seeing God's handprint on our trip. We just knew we were supposed to go. It started for me definitely after we were fully funded, and then we had extra, and then the laptops happened, and it just continued throughout the trip. I felt completely prepared because I knew we had God on our side walking in. And then we just met amazing kids that were excited to hear the gospel and had so many questions and were ready to sit down and listen. I don't think we could have asked for it to go any other way. It was all God's timing and His plan, and I definitely learned a lot about God's timing. Moldova did good things in terms of slowing me down and teaching me to worry less and rely on God in even the most scary ways of just getting up in front of people and dancing and leading an Energizer, or singing in front of people, even if it isn't a group. I just don't like doing that usually. And so getting to realize that, when the scripture says that we shouldn't plan for tomorrow without, first thinking about God in it, I definitely understood that a lot better on this trip. And it was just amazing to see His hand in the timing of conversations with the kids, and notes that, I came upstairs one day and Jasmine's writing a note, and I was on my way to write a note for someone else, and I was just like, this is amazing. I just felt so led. It was definitely a moment where I felt like God was there, our safety, and even just getting to go to an orphanage. I know we were all kind of like a little bummed about that, and then it worked out and we got to go to the orphanage, and meeting all those kids, it definitely puts on my heart a desire to go back and to do more. It just made things a lot more real for me to see them in an orphanage. It's different when they come to a camp and they're there. It's easy to just be like, oh, these are kids at a camp. But the moment we walked up to that orphanage, I was like, this is so much more serious than I think I was understanding it to be.
I could be called a reluctant traveler because when I felt called to go to Moldova, I didn't want to go. And I reached a point knowing, and actually telling a friend, that God will get me where He wants me to be, and that I just needed to cooperate, to obey, and He did. He did. Any apprehension, any anxiety, just taking care of plans. And in fact, since January, the team, we were able to see all the plans that God, He just worked out. There was so much prayer even before we were to leave in my Bible study. So when I got vertigo on Wednesday night, when my ear was congested, I think I was more struck by His sovereignty, and I had such peace that the plans had changed so dramatically, but I had this peace. that I can't describe. I was sad every day, but I knew He was sovereign. I trusted His will for me and the team, and I still do. I trusted Him in my going, and I needed to trust Him in my staying.
For me, it was really cool to see just everything that the kids had gone through and how hard their lives growing up were, definitely compared to us, and just how they still really trusted God in everything, and that was inspiring to see. And one of the girls, she had messaged me after the trip and just thanked us for coming and everything, and I actually got to talk to her a little bit more about just specific things that she was wondering about, so that was cool to be a part of that as well. It was also cool to see how open the kids were to hearing about the gospel, how once they did hear it, how they really wanted to know more. I feel like that's kind of not really how it is here in the States, so that was cool to see how you could tell them, and they could see that since their lives were so tragic that, oh wow, there is hope for this life and this is it, how they wanted to trust it in them. And the last night they had an altar call, and that was cool to see all the kids go up there and accept them. That was a very emotional night, but it was good.
A big thing that I experienced on the trip was just being able to get to know some of the other believers that were there, whether it was some of the kids or the translators or even some other adults there, and just being able to recognize and know the bond and connection that we had through Christ, being brothers and sisters in Christ. So it was neat to be able to talk to them and get to know them a bit and kind of hear some of their stories and where they came from, and then be able to encourage each other in our faith. I was able to write a few different letters to some people and kind of try to encourage them and give them some Bible verses. So, and they also encouraged me, like seeing how every day they get up and die to self and live for Christ. Whether it's just them or there's a few people, they're not when everybody around them knows Christ. So that was encouraging to see. And talking to Denise beforehand about the trip she went on, I kind of knew about some of the people, some of the girls in the transition homes, and heard a little bit about the house parents. So it was really cool to actually meet them and get to know them a bit. And me and Faith sat in the front seat with Sergey from the Kishinev house, so we got to know him a bit, and it was neat to talk to him and kind of know his story and how we can be praying for him and his family. And there was one girl from the camp who was a camper that I did a little bit of the bike stuff with, and also got to talk to her a little bit more afterwards. And we've actually still been talking on Messenger through Facebook, so it's been neat to get to know her more and kind of know her background with her family and who's a believer and how she goes to church still and everything she does over there. So
when we first got to Moldova, we were in Kishinev, and we were checking into our apartment that we were going to have for 2 days there. And down in the lobby, there was a young guy that was kind of this funny little guy that was kind of hip, kind of cool, talking broken English, and he was just kind of talking back and forth with us. We got checked into the rooms, and within about 20 minutes or so, Sergey informed Nicole that actually that guy was a pimp, and he had just recruited 2 girls into prostitution. And it was kind of a sobering moment to just realize that we were here and this is real. And there's situations going on that we just have to be aware of at all times. Reality was we never saw the guy again, nothing else happened, but it was just sobering to kind of start off that way. When we got over to camp the first day, things were very chaotic. Things weren't working the way we wanted to. That evening we had a team meeting to kind of discuss how are we going to go forward, what are we going to do with all these changes, things aren't working. And Russ kind of wrapped up the conversation that night by saying, you know, I think it's important that we concentrate on what we do have that God has provided as opposed to what we don't have and what we wanted. And that really set a tone for the rest of the week to just rely on God. And as we can say now, at the backside of this whole project, yes, everything worked out perfectly when we got out of the way and just let God do his work.
I think one of the things that stood out to me in Moldova was the way that the kids, they just really needed affirmation from someone, and just the smallest word to say to them, you know, the Lord has given you a certain gift. If you recognize something in a certain kid and you're able to say, God has gifted you in this area, and to encourage that. One boy, he was about 13 years old, Artyom, he would stay after the woodcraft. We were building little boats, and he would stay after and do extra things on his boats, and he showed up another day to help some other kids with some things. And just being able to, through an interpreter, talk to him in Russian and say, just affirm him, and to say that God has given you this gifting to where you're good at engineering things, and to encourage that in him, and to give God the glory for that, I think was a really neat thing. The other thing for me was just seeing how at different points in the week, how the Lord used the giftings of different people in the group that you wouldn't have thought were going to be used in a certain way, but just at the right time, he'd bring along the right person from our team to speak into a certain situation or share their testimony, and it just tied in really well with what they were talking about that day. So that is what really stood out to me, and just seeing the Lord use the different personalities even and giftings of the people on the team was really neat for me. So.